we have guests. Ross has his group here who I consider very special civil servants who are helping us tonight. I consider them basically heroes, and I mean that. So, Ross, if you could introduce them, and I'll explain what I mean by that later. You know, he will introduce them as they come up to speak. It takes care of that. Yes, sir. Anyone else have guests here? Yep.
My wife, Cynthia Ruoff, and she's a professor of French at Western Michigan University, and it was my pleasure that she came tonight.
Thank you. Welcome. Over with you over here, Larry. You know, are you
Thank you. My lovely wife is accompanying me tonight, Anne.
okay? Do we have everyone now? So that is all of our guests. Okay. So just before we go on, a reminder that your dues are due, either $125 for the semester or $250 for the year. Jim Coppinger is acting as Joe Fugate tonight, so if you get the money, give it to him. But you can also get out of payments entirely by getting us new members who sign up on a permanent basis, and each one you sign up is worth a semester worth of tuition. So if you consider that. So one other item, both Howard and I have completed the work of putting together all these speakers for the last 2 years, and we need one or a team of you to get presenters for the 22-23 season. I think somebody over here mentioned they had something I wanted to bring up, or one of the speakers. Okay, so we have one programmer. John Allen isn't here, but he's a World War II buff, as you know, from the last semester. And I think there's a program, if any of you watch CBS 60 Minutes, there was a program about the Ritchie Boys, who were a group of, many of which were German immigrants who came over here pre-war, joined the Army, and they were put into a group of 1,800 people who were trained, soldiers who were trained as interrogators. And so with their German background, they were able to go over and establish a rapport. It's pretty fascinating. You know, this happened, what, 70 years ago, and people didn't know about it for a very simple reason. The work they did was so effective, it became part of the CIA. And so they were not willing to disclose what they did, and this program about them is absolutely fascinating. As I mentioned, a bunch of Jewish immigrants, but there was also some people who were not, one of whom you may have heard of, a guy by the name of David Rockefeller. Is one of those people, which I find absolutely fascinating. So if we could kind of talk John Allen into giving that, we got perhaps 2 presentations for next year. Okay, so why did I call these ladies and gentlemen here heroes? Well, my background. I was a lawyer in New York at a fancy Wall Street boutique firm. Like the military, we had a uniform of the day, which was every day, a Brooks Brothers striped shirt, button-down collar. Everywhere you went in court, like Southern District, that's everybody else was the same way. So that was it. Came out to the Upjohn Company, same thing. At the end of it, you might call it white privilege, because that's a male privilege, very much so. So when I retired, a friend of mine by the name of Maury DaCosta, you may know Sonny Hill, he told me he was chair of an organization called the Kalamazoo County Foster Care Review Board. And he asked me if I was interested. I said, what the heck is that? So naturally I volunteered. Okay? Quite a contrast to what I've been dealing with before. The job of the board, and I think there's one in every county, isn't there, Steve? And throughout the state, is it federally mandated? It's not, okay. So what they would do is they'd give us 2 or 3 or maybe 4 cases every month out in the foster care to review and just give our opinion on how the whole process was going, whether it was children's services or the judges or anyone else involved in it, okay? And that, to say that was a wake-up call and shocking to somebody with what I was talking about is mind-boggling. It's going in and you see, I still have this image in my head of being in a hearing, and up in front is a 19-year-old girl, 8 months pregnant. They're going to take her parental rights away from the 2 younger kids who were with her 38-year-old grandmother. And this was fairly typical of what you would run into. And some of the people would say, 4 young kids, 4 unknown fathers, and on, and then the abuse and neglect that you would see. And I was saying to my so-called white privileged friends, there's another part of this world that you don't even know anything about, and there are a great number of dedicated civil servants who do this every day, okay, to take care of this for you and for us. And one day I ran into Sid Williams' wife. Sid Williams was a patent lawyer and quarterback. His wife was a family law judge. And I said, I can't believe what's going on. I said, how do you handle it? She says, there are occasions. She said, I go back into my chambers after one of these hearings, and I do a primal scream. That's how bad it is. So, and let's see if there's anything else here. So anyway, I got through that. So, all right, now to the man of the hour, Ross Stancati. I need a bio from him for his intro, but I didn't get it. So I threatened to talk to his lawyer adversaries and judges and get their opinion. And voila, up pops his, his biography. Ross was born at a very early age. Well, in Ambridge, Pennsylvania. Well, what I mean by that, the country was very young. Okay. Okay. He went to Western for a BA, and he went to Michigan for his law degree. He was waitlisted for, it was his fallback school. He was waitlisted for Cooley. So in any case, obviously a member of the State Bar, a member of the Family Law Council, does all the things he'll tell you about that's going in there. He does estate planning. He did small business development. During his career, he's participated and or accomplished the following. Hosted a 1-hour TV program presenting, quote, The Law and You, and he did that for 5 years, kind of interesting. Served as a member of the City of Kalamazoo Board of Appeals. He taught negotiable instruments, certified financial advisor, appointed a panel of arbitrators, served as a volunteer for pro bono stuff. So Ross has been around. Now, one last thing before we get him started. Each of his speakers is going to be limited in time so that we can get through this before tomorrow. So maybe an arm will go up saying, hey, your time is up, which normally works fairly well. Now, all of you who have seen television and trials have seen judges bang a gavel and tell an attorney to sit down and shut up, okay? Well, guess what we have tonight? We have a judge who's going to be up talking for 5 minutes, and I want to see if Ross has the guts to bang the gavel and tell him to shut up. All right, Ross, over to you.
That's fine, thank you. Okay, let's put the first thing up there, will you? the first one? Okay. Yes, that's the first one. What we have up on the screen is a statute that was created by our legislature in 1996. And it was a statute in what was known as Chapter 10 of our revised Judiciary Act. And it created the family court. It created the family court. And one of the first things that you learn about what they said about creating the family court was, if you read it, the chief circuit judge and the chief probate judge shall enter into an agreement that establishes a plan known as a family court plan. Going on, it says, shall provide that a judge's service pursuant to a family court plan be consistent with the goal of developing sufficient judicial expertise in family law to properly serve the interests of the families and children whose cases are assigned to that judge. This statute created the family court. Before that time, basically the circuit court in its general jurisdiction handled divorces, and the probate court handled a whole bunch of other things that had to do with kids and crimes of kids, a whole list of things. But this is the creation in 1996. It was amended in a few years later twice. But what you're looking at, if you scroll up, please, is that statute that created the family court. And I've kind of yellowed out what I've just read to you. Keep going. Okay. So basically what it says here is that there's going to be a plan that the circuit judges, the chief circuit judge and the chief probate judge was going to have a plan for the creation of this court. And I'll talk about that plan in a minute. The jurisdiction of this court comes from another statute. Would you please keep scrolling up to the other statute, please? Yes, the next one, please. And again, this is section 600, 1021, in the same part of the Judiciary Act of 1961. And as we go up slowly, you can see, bring it up, what this court's jurisdiction was. Those first ones there that say 5521 and all of those 552s, that all has to do with divorce. Okay? As you scroll up, you see that the family court has a lot more things that it's doing or has to do. Keep going. Keep going. And so the jurisdiction of this family court isn't just divorce. It has to do with every part of family life and family disputes. And I will tell you now about your family court here in Kalamazoo and their background. Remember what I said? It was supposed to be, somehow we were supposed to, in this statute, we're supposed to have people who were, in the statute, if you read it, who had some learning in family law. Well, our current family court in Kalamazoo has one circuit judge who, before he became a circuit judge, never practiced in family law. We have one probate judge in family court who came from the prosecutor's office and never practiced in family law. The third judge, and by the way, we have three judges in our family court here in Kalamazoo. The third judge was a district court judge that was running at the same time as another person was running for a probate position. And that district court judge, who had never practiced family law, was assigned to our family court. So we had three judges, a district court judge, a probate court judge, and a circuit court judge, none of whom were schooled in family law to begin with. Now, as is usually the case, if you are in family court as a judge, and I've been practicing in family court for over 50 years, these people, these judges, were in fact dedicated, and they did well, and they served us well. One of those circuit judges is sitting here, and I will tell you, in my estimation, he's probably one of the best family court judges in the 6-county area. I'm bragging about you. Brown-nosing a little bit, maybe. Okay. Plans in other counties that are as big as ours turn out about the same way. They get people into the family court, and there really is a family court. In circuits like Van Buren, St. Joe, they only have one circuit judge, one probate judge. And so what has been their plans? Well, basically, what they do is divide the family court. One of the judges takes cases that have no children involved, and the other judge, either probate or circuit, takes the cases that have children involved. That's their plan. Jurisdictions like ours, who have populations like us, have family court. I don't believe that exists in the small counties where we only have one circuit judge and one probate judge. Okay, so there's our jurisdiction. And now I want to introduce to you, and they're going to have 5 minutes to tell you what they do in family court. Okay? How about it? Steve Garcelitz, one of our finest family court judges in the 6-county area.
Thanks, Ross. Actually, I need to correct Ross. I did family work for 25 years before I became a judge. I was appointed in St. Joe County to do abuse, neglect, and delinquency work. And I did divorce work. Ross just didn't know me. Let me talk about what we do in the family court in Kalamazoo, Michigan. And I am one of 3, and we just had Judge Phillips retire. So we have a space open there, and we're looking for the governor to appoint somebody really quick because we're very busy in the family court. Paul Yancho here is a referee. We have 5 referees, and they do a lot of what we do, and they're very busy. Let me tell you what we do. Divorce, custody, parenting time, support, and we have one of the top support people in the state of Michigan, Jennifer Granzo, right there. She's with the prosecutor's office. And our friend of the court, Nigel Crum, is right here, and he's one of the top friend of the court people in the state of Michigan, bar none. So we do support, spousal support, property division, division of assets, and all of that business. We do protective proceedings. Anybody know what that is? A protective proceeding? It's an abuse and neglect case. That means some parent has abused or neglected their child, and now the Department of Health and Human Services, CPS, Children's Protective Services, have brought them into court. And often we end up removing the children from the parents, and sometimes it leads to termination of their parental rights, which is a most difficult decision that we probably make. We try to reunify. There's a long period of time that goes by that the parent tries to recover from their problems, whatever led them to be a neglectful parent. And we have a family treatment court, which is a drug treatment court for parents who are, their issue is addiction of some sort, of alcohol or drugs. We do a number of delinquency cases that go formal and many that don't go formal. They're informal. In 2019, we had 1,511 delinquency cases filed. 331 of them were formal, and they were adjudicated either by a trial or a plea responsible for their crime. These are children. It was 17 and under, and now the law has changed. It's going to be 18 and under. So there'll be some changes regarding number of children that we'll be dealing with. We do paternity cases. This is what Jennifer deals with. And those cases often deal with DNA testing and determination of who's the dad. We also have something called Revocation of Paternity Act cases, and that's where somebody thought they were the dad and weren't. Like in a marriage where the mother has an affair and she has a child by someone else, a motion can be filed for DNA testing and determination of whose child is that. That's a new statute. We do adoptions. We do step-parent and regular adoption. Step-parent is where the parties are married. The father hasn't been around, hasn't provided any visitation for 2 years, hasn't paid any support for 2 years, and so they come in and the mother has her husband adopt the child. We have to terminate that, the legal parent's rights. We do PPOs, permanent personal protection order cases. Those are being done a lot by the Chief Judge, Sandy Lipsey. We used to do them all, but now he's doing most of them, as well as the trial division downtown here. But we still do the ones that involve the domestic cases that are in front of us. We do parental waivers. Those are waivers of parental consent for abortions. Because of medications and so forth, those aren't very prevalent anymore. So that's what we do. We're very busy. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, well, we've already had introductions of who's at the table, so let's have Paul Yanko come up here. He's new to us. He's only been a referee for 2 years, is that right, Paul? But he's great. He does a great job, and he'll tell you what he does.
Thank you, Ross. And forgive me if I get sidetracked. I'm usually tucking little kids into bed right now and heading off to sleep myself. But Judge really covered a lot of what we do. And so my role as an attorney referee, it covers a lot of different subjects within the family court. There's a statute that allows the court to appoint attorneys as hearing officials, and I can do a number of things. I can make recommendations to the judges, but what I say isn't what goes. It's when Judge Gorsalitz's signature is on the paper, that's when it becomes an order and something that's enforceable. I do help handle abuse and neglect cases, delinquency cases, post-judgment domestic cases, so pretty much anything that isn't dealing with property matters in a domestic case I can handle. Like this week, I happen to be on call. All of the hearing officials in Kalamazoo County have a time period where they're on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in case the Department of Health and Human Services wants to, say, remove a child or children into protective custody. I'll get those 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning calls and type up an order, and the children will be removed. It's an interesting job. We get to interact with a lot of different people. I guess I can cover the fact that the last couple of years, Zoom hearings have really changed how things operate. I came into this job with a background as I was a defense attorney first, and then I was a prosecuting attorney for Kalamazoo County, and then I moved into this position as an attorney referee. And the ability to talk face to face with people and interact and get that time before court was really crucial to a lot of things, and COVID, of course, changed that. And now the state of Michigan and the Supreme Court of the state of Michigan have bought thousands of Zoom licenses for all the hearing officials, and so now everything is on Zoom. But I think what's interesting with that is, while you lose a lot of the personal aspects, you lose a lot of the austerity of the court, the grandiosity of the court. You get more parental participation, because there is a stigma to coming to court. There are the barriers of transportation coming to court. So you, am I almost done?
No.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I just had
I thought that was the gavel. But you do get more participation in court, and I think that's been a pretty remarkable thing to come out of COVID. Attorneys are able to handle more cases in a day because they're able to schedule things from their home. But we've kept on with the same schedule in the court. We work from home or we work from the court, and it's been an interesting time. But I don't know, what else should I cover, Judge?
You got it.
We don't have a lot of control over people sitting in their car or dining room and on their phone.
We don't. I've actually had to hold up signs that say "put on a shirt," or I've had to ask people to please stop having a cigarette in the middle of the hearing. This is still court. Please stop eating that sub sandwich, that sort of thing. But yeah, like I said, you lose some of the part of actually being physically in court. But Zoom has been interesting. It's allowed us to keep going and still just churn through the cases. And they are tough sometimes. They're mentally demanding. Everybody's here nodding their head. But I think, the Kalamazoo County Court does a good job of helping protect everybody's rights in the family law arena. So, Dan, thank you for having us.
What Paul hasn't told you, and probably I can tell you, is that when Paul makes a decision, he indicated to you it's not a decision until the judge signs it. Actually, his decisions are recommendations, and I will tell you that most of the time, the judge doesn't have to have a hearing because there's been no objection to his ruling. That means he's pretty good in what he does. Okay, for our next person, who's been introduced as the finest in Kalamazoo, we have Nigel Crum, our friend of the court. No, it wasn't the finest in Kalamazoo. You said finest in the States. Yes.
5 minutes. First of all, thank you very much, Ross, for the gracious invitation here, and thank you all very much for having me. Very much appreciated. I am the friend of the court. The friend of the court's office is the machine that enforces court orders. As brilliant as the words that come out of Judge Gorselitz's mouth or the pen of Paul Yancho, occasionally people don't follow those orders, and that's when these guys call me and my guys to make sure they do. We handle domestic cases, so that's divorces, paternity actions, that kind of thing. A lot of child support, right? And parenting time as well. Making sure that both people have access to children that they're supposed to have and spend the time with the children that they need to, and to make sure that people pay for the support of those children. Friend of the court, it's actually not a title I've ever liked. It's fairly archaic. It's an old title. Friend of the court predates family law by quite a bit. Friend of the court has been around since 1919 here in Michigan. It was set up right after the First World War, when anytime there's a big social upheaval, our caseloads go up. And so, as a matter of fact, the highest divorce rate in Michigan history was 1946. That was the highest divorce rate. So right after the war and the Spanish flu and all of that, they decided to set up an office, and that's what we do. It's a big machine. We cost about $4 million a year to run, but we collect about $39 million a year in child support and distribute it. So we're good for the buck, and we're probably so cost efficient because you don't pay us enough. but we are an effective office. So that is our job. That is who we are. We make sure that the good decisions that are made, by the judges and the referees mean something and will be enforced and will be followed. Thank you very much for your time.
Well, we're not going to call the prettiest for last. And why is it that we have to have a prosecuting attorney in family court? Well, Ms. Granjaw is going to tell us why we have a prosecuting attorney in family court.
So, you've heard the stories of everybody else, and I'm kind of the cog in the middle that makes everything flow. The prosecutor's office has not only a federal mandate for the office, for each state to have a plan on how they're going to administer family court, they have a requirement that paternity and child support will be handled with a state plan. And in Michigan, the state plan says the prosecutor holds that responsibility. So in our county, we handle not only the abuse and neglect side of life, and that's what we call our juvenile division, but we also have the support division, which is what I run. We receive referrals from the state of Michigan of families who are in need of support for children or to have parentage established. We receive, depending on the year, anywhere from 1,500 to 1,800 cases referred to us. Of those, I determine the legal viability of them, and we get those cases filed, and I do a darn good job trying to make sure that they're enforceable and unassailable. And that's where Nigel comes in, because while I might have the case for 6 months or so to complete it, Nigel gets them for 20 years to enforce them. So I have to do a good job in what I do, so I don't hear from him every day, what is this baloney you sent to my office? But seriously, one of the dynamics that we see can come into play, and Judge Garcia mentioned this, is the issue of parentage. We live in a society now where parentage is far more fluid in terms of people not necessarily having children in a marriage or having children during a marriage that are not their husband's children. And so I'm left to untangle that web in many situations. We have an individual right now who has what I call a serial marriage habit. They have been married and had children with somebody else, then had a divorce and then married the next person, but they always seem to have the kids with the next person down the line before they've closed out their previous marriage. So sometimes I create spreadsheets. It's a complex area of the law. It's an ever-evolving area of the law. We're dealing with questions of parentage in same-sex marriages. We're dealing with questions of parentage in the family law arena, because if you are a legal parent, you have so many more attendant rights. You have the appointment of counsel. You have the right to respond. You have the right to notice of things that are happening. And so there's so many different tentacles that run out from parentage, and probate court handles all the issues regarding who has the right to inherit. And so part of what we do in determining parentage has so many trickle-down effects that we really touch 1 in 4 families in this county. And so it's a huge responsibility. It happens to be a vocation for me, and I like it. I've been doing this now in Kalamazoo for 25 years. And in that time period, I've had the ability to serve with the legislature to draft the Revocation of Parentage Act. And that's a constantly evolving question. And to draft the child support formula so it determines what support is appropriate for a given family based on income and overnights and things of that nature. So it's a constantly evolving area of the law, but it's a lot of fun to me. Nigel thinks I drink the Kool-Aid of the state, but you know. Anyway, if you have a question, I'm often available. Not now. No, not right now. But I get emails and phone calls from all over the state asking me, what should I do in this dynamic? How do we handle this particular case? And the one thing that I've learned, and Ross can attest to this because he knows, and he taught me this, it always comes down to the basic elements. What are your basic elements? And there's always a path. And we work the job of getting people through that path of dissolutions of marriages, of deaths, of creating families, and all of that. And so that's what our overarching responsibility is.
In the divorce era of our family court, judges cannot appoint attorneys for divorcees. They can't give them advice. But we do have appointed attorneys in family law in all other cases other than divorce. And to tell you about appointed attorneys, I have here Larry Monti, who'll give you a little bit of a talk about what he does.
Thank you. A few years ago, I decided to retire and close my office. But a certain judge who's sitting here suggested that possibly I would enjoy being on the contract. And his words are, I would really like to have some attorneys, court-appointed attorneys with my experience in family law. I was silly enough to accept that challenge, and 6 years later, I'm still doing it. When CPS, DHHS, but most of us know it as CPS, bring a petition for abuse and neglect. You got a mom, you have at least one dad. If there's more than one child, you often have two, and I've had as many as 4 dads in abuse and neglect cases. So you're going to have attorneys for those dads, and then the children get their own attorney, and we're called attorney guardian ad litems. And so when I get a call from the assignment clerk, I'm either going to represent a mom, a dad, or children. And quite frankly, I enjoy all of it. My approach from the very beginning is that we have prosecutors, we have caseworkers, we have referees, and we have attorneys. We're really all on the same team. It can look adversarial, but I do everything I can to stay away from that appearance. But parents need representation. They need somebody that they can talk to. If you're a parent and DHS came in on a court order by a referee removing your children, or taking your baby, a newborn baby, from the hospital, you're a very unhappy person. You're angry, you're bitter, and you may be high as a kite, and you may be drug addicted. The attorney needs to deal with that immediately. And that's what I try to do. I try to explain to this parent, look, we're here to reunite you with your child, but we've got to make some changes. We got to dry you out. We got to get you at the Gilmore Center. You know, we got to get you into some kind of drug counseling. And oftentimes a CPS worker is not viewed as their best friend. That's the person that just took their baby away from them, or their 3 kids. And so as an attorney assigned to representing that parent, you've got to be honest with them, explain to them over and over what's happened and why, and then look for the positive and what can we do to get these kids back. And usually it takes 8 months to a year, sometimes 2 years. Now, if a parent just can't get with it, continues the drug addiction, will not accept, we call them services, and is resistant to that, eventually we'll have a hearing in front of a referee, and the referee will authorize the prosecutor's office to file a petition to terminate parental rights. And that's tough. That's very tough. It's hard on the attorney, and it's really hard on the parents. But your job is, at that point, say, now look, you still got a chance, let's get it straightened out. But that's what we do as court-appointed attorneys. The other part of that is if you're the guardian ad litem. And then your job is you're the advocate for the children. You want those kids in a safe environment. And so, before every hearing, we visit with these kids. Oftentimes, if they're school age, I'll go to the school where they're free to talk about what's going on, maybe in their foster home or with their parents or during parenting time. But those are the aspects. The other part, we can be assigned to represent a juvenile delinquent, which is basic criminal law. And again, my approach is different as an attorney for a juvenile delinquent. I don't play the game, oh, it's an illegal search, everything you see on TV. If I've got a 15-year-old that stole a car, I want to know why. And I want to work with that parent. I'm not going to play the defense game of trying to get the kid off. We need to find out what's going on in that home, what's going on with that child, what kind of counseling can that child use, and how do we shape that child so we don't have a repeat offender, and when he's 17 or 18, he's in the county jail rather than juvenile facility. Thank you.
I didn't want to step on the judge's toes in terms of talking about some of the statistics. Excuse me. But I'd like to give you some other statistics other than what Steve gave you. Total filings in the circuit court, that is criminal cases, civil cases, appeal cases, total 5,188 for the year 2000. 5,188. Family cases, out of those 5,188, 3,405. More than 2/3 of the whole circuit court work go to family court. Now I'll give you another statistic that Steve didn't talk about. We have what is known as beginning pending. Beginning pending. That means cases that have not yet been adjudicated. They're in a process, but they're not done yet. And at the end of 2019, we had 588 pending cases. At the end of 2020, we had 629 pending cases, meaning we're falling behind. Really. These people work very hard, very hard. Just can't imagine the kind of work that they put in terms of what they do. Okay, I'm done. Do you have any questions, please? Yes, sir.
I think it was Nigel, you mentioned in 1946 was the peak historic divorce rate?
Yeah.
For the country or for
Michigan.
For Michigan.
Yeah.
Is there some rationale that's historically been determined for why that was a particular peak year?
Yeah, I mean, it's, I haven't really dug into the numbers that much. Basically, the war ends, and you have a lot of people coming home, and the guy who left is not the guy who came back, and the woman who stayed, who's been working in a factory, is not the woman that he left either. And so you've got a lot of people sitting over a dinner table who got married young, and they don't even recognize themselves, let alone the other person. So they got divorced. But divorce rates spiked after the first war as well. Early 20s was one of the highest rates, and then 46 was the highest after that.
Thank you.
The next year that we had a spike was the year in which no-fault divorce became the way divorces were handled in this state. And they spiked to almost 50% of all marriages. That was in 1975 or 72. That was a spike. Before that time, weren't that many divorces, but there was a spike. There weren't that many divorces because divorce was not well looked upon. But a pressure mounted and mounted and mounted, and our legislature passed a law taking away fault and indicating that a divorce can be granted if, in fact, your objects of matrimony have been destroyed, and there is no reason for anyone to believe the marriage could be preserved. That's all you can say today in a complaint for divorce. You can't talk about adultery or any other fault that the other party may have had. This is all you can say. And that statement is subjective. That means that it's in my head. My head. I don't love you anymore. So how are you going to reach my head to figure out whether I'm lying or not? You can't. So there's no defense to a divorce. And that began in 1975, and there was a huge spike in divorces at that time. Other questions?
Well, I think I kind of gathered too from some of the things that I was hearing that there is an increase in the flow, the numbers that are coming through this system, and then on top of that, it sounds like it's getting more complicated with the different combinations of relationships altogether. Is that a concern of trying to have a process that's able to handle this moving dynamic?
We can handle it. We've been handling it. We can handle it. You know, in terms of 1,500 divorces were filed in 2020. 1,500 divorces. For 3 judges, that's what? 500 divorces per judge? Less than 95%. I'm sorry. Less than 5% actually get to a judge. Really. We have such wonderful people who keep you from going to that judge. Like our present person here, who's a mediator. We have mediation, we have arbitration, we have all kinds of systems to keep the parties away from him. Why? Why do you want to keep away from him? Because as an attorney for a client, I get about half the facts from my client as to what the situation is. Okay? The clients know what the situation is. They're the only ones with all the facts. Me, as an attorney, I get maybe 50, 60% of the facts. He doesn't get 25% of the facts because of all of the laws that keep evidence from coming in, like hearsay and foundation and other defenses that we have in keeping things. And he has to make decisions with no facts of any consequence that you and I would understand. And we're talking about decisions that are very serious. We're talking about decisions that change the lives of people and children. And they don't have, all they have is their background to make those decisions. Every judges and those people who make decisions in family court have a hard time. Most judges who are assigned to family court don't want to be there because it's too hard. Thankfully, Steve's been there for over 20 years and he's been great at it.
I ran for the position.
That's right. And he stayed there. That's not usual. That's not what happens in family court. Judges in family court try to get out of it as soon as they get assigned to it. Okay, any more questions? I'm sorry.
I've got kind of a two-sided question. I wonder how you all feel about the fact that we've got clearly a mental health crisis in this country at the moment. You mentioned the impact of drugs on parental behaviors and certainly child abuse. How much is the fact that we're undergoing a mental health crisis at the moment? We don't have enough mental health providers. The funding is simply not there in many, many cases. So how much does that contribute to what you're seeing? So that's one part. The second part of this is, how do you personally, I understand, the system can handle cases, but personally, what you must be seeing every day must be absolutely gut-wrenching. How do you manage to get through that on a day-by-day basis?
If you get there long enough, you hear all kinds of stories, and they get brutal, and you live with it. But in terms of, if I have a client come in, man or woman, and they tell me their story, it doesn't make any difference what their story is. My last statement to them is, do you have a counselor? If you don't have a counselor, I'd like for you to get one. If you don't know one, I'll find one for you. Because A divorce is stressful. It's horrible. I mean, they've gone through a marriage, and then through that marriage, they have somehow found they don't want to be there. And it's kind of like a failure. And so they come to me, or they come to any attorney, you're talking to a person who has mental problems, not serious mental problems, but mental problems, and you need to get them to a counselor so that they can cope. We used to have an organization here coping with divorce that a young man had for a long, long time. He's disappeared, and we don't have that now. And I'll tell you something about counselors that we send these people to. In 6 months, if they're good, they burn out. In 6 months, if they're good counselors, they burn out. They can't stand it. They can't take what we process to them. Any more questions?
Can I just touch on that very briefly? And I think Judge would probably agree with me, and he'll let me know if he doesn't. But there are a number of mental health services for adults. I don't think the amount is probably adequate for the crisis that we're undergoing right now. But where I see the real failure is with juvenile mental health. We get cases where it's very clear there's mental health problems, and there are some limited resources, but it's not enough. They don't have enough resources in schools. They don't have enough people that are trained to be juvenile counselors, and that is a huge problem that we're dealing with, and we see so much recidivism because of that, I think. And then you go on and they become adults with these problems that are deep-seated and they haven't been addressed adequately. And so a lot of what Judge and myself and the other hearing officials and everybody that's really involved with it, we aren't so much like legal experts or people working in the legal system. We become counselors, we become cheerleaders, we become trying to solve these problems in ways other than legally. And it's tough, and I'm not sure what the answer is right now. And as to the second part, I have a bit of a sick sense of humor, so I can deal with it. Thank you.
I'd like to just share with you who are embedded in our community that our local university, Western Michigan University, has the one of 2 accredited programs in marriage and family therapy in the state of Michigan. And having come from Texas A&M to Michigan in '85, one of my goals was, and I think our department's goal, was to develop a program in the very area that you're talking about, is to work with couples, families, children, and especially areas like stepchildren, which is an awfully difficult area. And we are the only accredited program now in Southwest Michigan, and you have it here. And I just want to let you know that we have been graduating somewhere between 15 to 20 people a year for the past 15 years. And now they obviously go all over the state of Michigan, but there are resources, and I mean, what you're pointing out is the huge amount of pain and distress, and there are more than just legal resources, obviously, that are available to people that are struggling with the kinds of issues that you're talking about in terms of abuse, neglect, so on and so forth. But many families, middle class, upper middle class families, are now seeking out those services from people that graduate from accredited programs. And I think Western Michigan University is very proud of having an accredited program here. So if any of you need to know any more about that, I'd be glad to help. And perhaps, maybe down the road, I'll talk a little bit more about that kind of a program here, because it isn't just those folks that are embedded in the legal system, but you have faith-based organizations and obviously professional organizations like the American Association for Marriage and Family Therapy that do a lot of work in this area here to help support families and children.
Have we got everybody else here? Well, I want to thank you all for making this presentation for us. I've got 2 typically odd comments, and One is, you know, back when I was in New York, which is 100 years ago, the only two grounds for divorce were abandonment and adultery. And the way couples could get around the adultery issue was for professional photographers who knew how to show up at hotel rooms and get one of the parties to pose in there with somebody else. And that was, we used to call it a cottage industry that they had to get around and do it. I don't know whether it was ever true or not. But the other thing, as you mentioned, is some of the crazy behavior of people on Zoom. And just crazy behavior of people just in general. As I said, you know, I do what we call early stage divorce mediation. The couples come to me, they want to have a mediated divorce. They don't want to have the big battle. And I did one, I must have been about 12 years ago, and we were going along pretty well, but the wife was we'll say a little aggressive. In any case, she sent me a document which I couldn't understand. So one morning about 10 o'clock, I called her. She was down at a conference in Florida, and she's on break. And I said, Mary, I don't understand this. I can't talk to you now. Mary, I don't understand this document because you just, I can't talk to you right now. I understand. It went on 2 or 3 times just saying, okay, just send it to me. And finally she says, how dare you call me when I'm in the toilet? I'm not kidding. And the thing is, thank God we didn't have FaceTime. Well, anyway, well, thank you all very much. And next week, or next month, which is what, the 20th, Fred Jackson's going to talk about the Statute of Liberty. It could be kind of interesting. But again, I please urge you, if you can come up with some programs, at least let us know what we can do so we can get working on 2023, okay? Again, thank you all. Again, thanks, Steve.